not what you think. The most famous teaching about questioning authority in all of Buddhism ends, in the actual text, with a teaching on loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. You have probably quoted it. You have almost certainly never heard how it ends. Tonight, the sutta everyone cites and almost no one finishes. You may have encountered a version of what the Buddha said to a people called the Kāḿamas. Do not believe anything on the basis of tradition. Do not believe scripture. Do not believe authority. Do not even believe careful reasoning. Believe only what you can verify through your own experience. Tonight, what the sutta actually says, and why the version you have probably heard. The version on the inspirational poster, the version in the popular book, the version that ends with "trust your own reason," is missing almost everything that makes the original teaching what it is. A group of people called the Kāḿamas had a problem, and it might be your problem too. Chapter 1. The version you know. The Kalama Sutta is one of the most cited texts in modern Buddhism. It is quoted on bookmarks. It is framed on Dharma center walls. It opens the first chapter of 1,000 introductions to meditation. It appears in TED Talks. It appears in commencement addresses. It is the passage Western readers reach for when they want to show that Buddhism is not a religion of dogma, that it is a religion, or perhaps not even a religion, of personal inquiry. And there is a reason for this. The reason is real. The Buddha did in this discourse set aside a list of authorities, tradition, scripture, hearsay, the word of teachers, and tell the people listening that these alone were not sufficient grounds for adopting a teaching. He did say something that, in the long history of religious teaching, is almost unique. He said, "Do not rely simply on what you have been told. The popular reading is not invented from nothing. It is built on something that is genuinely there. And it is important, before we turn the popular reading inside out, to honor what is true in it." The popular reading goes something like this. The Buddha walks into a town. The people of the town tell him that they have been visited by many teachers, each one praising his own doctrine and dismissing the others. They are confused. They ask, "Who should we believe?" And the Buddha, in a moment that has been called by one well-known commentator the Buddhist Charter of Free Inquiry, tells them they should believe none of those teachers on the strength of authority alone. They should test the teachings themselves. They should rely on their own observation, their own reason, their own experience. This is not a wrong reading. It is a partial one. The label Charter of Free Inquiry came from a Sri Lankan monk named Soma Thera. He included it in a small booklet that was first printed in 1959 in a series called The Wheel, published by the Buddhist Publication Society in Kandy. That booklet, Wheel number 8, was titled simply Kalama Sutta, the Buddha's Charter of Free Inquiry. It was a slim pamphlet, but it traveled. It traveled in particular through the hands of Western readers who had begun, in the late 1950s and the 1960s, to take Buddhism seriously, and to take it seriously, often, on terms quite different from the terms in which it had been transmitted across 2.5 millennia in Asia. These readers were looking for a tradition that did not demand belief in an unprovable God. They were looking for something they could take up without surrendering what they thought of as their intellectual integrity. The Kalama Sutta, framed as a charter of free inquiry, gave them exactly that, or seemed to. Alan Watts did not, as far as we can verify, quote the Kalama Sutta directly, but Watts set the cultural template into which the Kalama Sutta would soon fit. His Buddhism was a Buddhism for the questioner, the seeker who would not bow. After Watts, the soil was prepared. By 1979, John Kabat-Zinn was founding what would become mindfulness-based stress reduction at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center. Kabat-Zinn's project required, by design, that mindfulness be detachable from Buddhist metaphysics. The framing he offered, that meditation could be tested in clinical trials, that one need not believe anything in particular to practice it, fit the spirit of the popularized Kāḿamas Sutta almost perfectly. By 1997, the writer Stephen Batchelor had published Buddhism Without Beliefs, explicitly drawing on the Kāḿamas Sutta as a license to reconstruct Buddhism on what he called secular foundations. The sutta, in his hands, became a foundation stone for a Buddhism that asked nothing of the seeker except sincere inquiry. And on December 2nd, 2005, the Dalai Lama published an op-ed in the New York Times in which he affirmed, to a wide American readership, that if scientific investigation ever conclusively showed a Buddhist claim to be false, Buddhism would have to change to accommodate the finding. The argument was framed by many who read it as a contemporary expression of the spirit of the Kāḿamas Sutta. By the time the 21st century was a few years old, the Kāḿamas Sutta had become the most quoted sutta in the English-speaking world, and the version that was being quoted had, quietly and without anyone really noticing, separated from the version that exists in the actual text. The most extreme example of this separation is a quote that you may have seen. It is sometimes attributed to the Buddha. It is sometimes attributed to the Kāḿamas Sutta directly. It goes like this: believe nothing, no matter where you read it or who said it, no matter if I have said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and your own common sense. That quote is a fabrication. It is not from the Kāḿamas Sutta. It is not from any sutta. It does not appear in the Pali Canon. It does not appear in any reliable translation of any Buddhist text. It seems to have entered Western circulation through unattributed sources in the 20th century, and from there it spread onto greeting cards, onto motivational websites, onto the opening pages of self-help books, until it became, for many readers, the single sentence by which they knew what the Buddha had said. It is worth pausing on this, because the irony of this particular fabrication is unusually deep. Here is a quote about not believing things on the basis of authority, and the quote itself is being passed around on the authority of the Buddha, without anyone checking the source. The most quoted Buddhist injunction against accepting things uncritically is itself something that has been accepted uncritically. A sentence about not trusting unverified statements has, for decades, been trusted as an unverified statement. But the irony does not stop there, because the fabricated quote does not just lack authority, it contradicts the actual sutta. The fabricated quote tells you to believe what agrees with your own reason. The actual sutta, which we will turn to in a moment, does something different. Something that, if you have only heard the popular version, may surprise you. The Buddha did not, in the Kāḿamas Sutta, tell the Kālamas to trust their own thinking. He told them something stranger and something much harder. Before we turn to what he actually said, the popular version deserves one more sentence of honor. This version, the partial reading, the Charter of Free Inquiry, the Sutta, as it has been received in the West, has done good. It has opened a door. It has invited millions of people who would otherwise have walked past Buddhism as one more religious tradition demanding their assent, to step inside and take a closer look. Many of those people, having stepped inside, have gone on to read the actual text. Many have gone on to practice. The popular version was not, for them, the final destination. It was the threshold. It is not wrong. It is incomplete. What the rest of the sutta contains, and what the rest of the sutta asks of you, is the subject of what comes next. Chapter 2. What the text actually says. The setting of the sutta is a small town in northern India called Kesaputta, in the country of the Kāḿamas. The town is named in the opening line. The people of the town are named in the title. We know almost nothing else about them. The Kāḿamas appear in this discourse and a few other places in the canon, and that is all. They are not a major civilization. They are not a famous school. They are ordinary people living in an ordinary town who happen, on this particular day, to be visited by the Buddha. A note on numbering, and then we will leave it. The discourse we are about to read is, in the most widely used contemporary translation, that of Bhikkhu Bodhi, working from the standard edition of the Pali Canon. The 65th discourse in the Book of Threes. It is cited as AN 365. In a slightly different enumeration used by Thanissaro Bhikkhu of the Thai forest tradition, the same discourse is numbered 366. The text is the same. Throughout tonight, we will use the more widely cited number, AN 365, and when we quote translations, we will name the translator. One more brief clarification. The Buddha, before his awakening, had a teacher named Alara Kalama. The shared name is a coincidence. Alara Kalama, the meditation teacher, and the Kāḿamas of Kesaputta are not the same. He was an individual. They were a clan in a different region. This is worth noting only because the names look the same in English transliteration, and the confusion appears occasionally in popular accounts. We are not tonight discussing the Buddha's pre-awakening teacher. We are discussing the people of a town. The Kāḿamas come to the Buddha. They do not ask him a philosophical question. They do not ask him about the nature of reality, or the existence of the self, or the meaning of suffering. They ask him a practical question, a very human question. The question of someone who has been to the marketplace too many times. There are teachers, they say, who come through Kesaputta. Each one explains his own doctrine in full. Each one tears down the doctrines of the others. Each one says, this is the truth, and the others are wrong. We have heard so many of them, with such confidence, contradicting each other, that we no longer know what to think. We have doubts. We have perplexity. We do not know which of these teachers is telling the truth and which is telling falsehood. This is the question. And notice carefully what the question is. It is not, what is the truth? It is, who should we believe? The Kāḿamas are not metaphysicians. They are people who have been confused by too many confident men. They want to know whose word they can trust. What the Buddha does next is unusual. He does not say, you should believe me. He does not say, my doctrine is the right one and the others are wrong. He does something that, in the context of religious teaching in any age, is rare. He says, it is fitting for you to doubt. Your doubt has arisen about a matter that warrants doubt. He validates the perplexity itself. And then he gives them a list. The list is the heart of what the popular tradition has remembered. It is a list of things that, the Buddha says, are not by themselves sufficient grounds for accepting a teaching as true. The list has 10 items. We will go through them. And then we will arrive at the moment, which in this sutta has been almost entirely missed. Do not go, the Buddha says, by anusava, by oral transmission, by what has been heard repeatedly across generations. Do not go by parampara, by lineage, by the unbroken chain of teachers handing down a doctrine. Do not go by itikira, by hearsay, by this is what people say. Do not go by pitaka sampada, by what is contained in the collection of scriptures. So far, the list is what you might expect. The Buddha is setting aside the obvious external authorities, tradition, lineage, common report, scripture. If the sutta ended here, the popular reading would be roughly correct. But the list does not end here. It continues. Do not go by takahetu, by mere logical conjecture, by what seems to follow from reasoning. Do not go by nyahetu, by inference, by what appears to be implied. Do not go by akara parivitaka, by analogies, by reasoning from one case to another, by similarity of features. And then, the item that almost no one quotes, do not go, the Buddha says, by ditti nijana kanti, by the acceptance of a view after pondering it, by what has come to seem true to you after careful personal deliberation. Let me say that again, because this is the moment the popular reading misses entirely. The Buddha set aside tradition. You might expect that. He set aside scripture. Expected. He set aside the word of teachers. And yes, he set that aside too. But then he kept going. He set aside logic. He set aside inference. And then he set aside your own careful, thoughtful, considered deliberation. The acceptance of a view after you have pondered it. The conclusion you have arrived at after thinking it through. The position you hold after honest reflection. He set that aside too. This is what the popular reading does not say. The Buddha is not telling the Kāḿamas, do not trust other people, trust yourself. He is not telling them, question authority, follow your own reason. He is telling them something far stranger. He is telling them that their own reason by itself is also not enough. 2 more items complete the list. Do not go by bhavarupata, by the appearance of competence, by the air of authority that a teacher carries. And do not go by samano no garu, by the thought that this contemplative is our teacher, and so we must accept what he says. 10 grounds: tradition, lineage, hearsay, scripture, logical conjecture, inference, analogy, personal deliberation, the competent appearance of the teacher, the fact that the teacher is yours. All of them, the Buddha says, are insufficient as grounds by themselves for accepting a teaching. This is not a charter of free inquiry. This is something much more disorienting. The popular reading takes the first 4 items, ignores the next 4, and forgets the last 2, and then claims that the Buddha was endorsing the use of your own reason. But your own reason is on the list of things he set aside. Your own deliberation is on the list. Logic is on the list. Inference is on the list. The Buddha is not saying, think for yourself instead of trusting authority. He is saying, even thinking for yourself is not by itself sufficient. You can feel, perhaps, why the popular reading would prefer to stop after the first 4 items, because if all 10 items are taken seriously, the question becomes urgent. If neither tradition nor scripture nor my own teacher, nor my own logical reasoning, nor even my own careful deliberation is sufficient, what is? This is where the sutta goes next, and this is where almost no one follows it. The Buddha gives the Kālamas a criterion, not a doctrine, a criterion, 4 components. We will take them one at a time. The first component, in the Pali, is akusala. The word is usually translated as unskillful, though unwholesome appears in some renderings. It is not a moral term in the modern Western sense. It is closer to a craftsman's term. An unskillful action is one that does not bring about what the actor was actually trying to bring about. It misses its aim. It makes things worse. The Buddha is asking the Kālamas of any teaching they encounter. When this teaching is put into practice, are the resulting actions skillful? Do they bring about what was actually intended? Or do they miss? Think about that for a moment. The question is not whether the teaching is true in the abstract. The question is whether, when a person takes the teaching up and acts on it, the resulting actions accomplish what a wise person would want to accomplish, or whether they miss the mark, the way a poorly fitted tool goes wide. You do not need to be a philosopher to make this observation. You need to be paying attention. The observation can be made, this is the Buddha's point, by you, on the basis of what you can already see. The second component is savaja, blameworthy. The actions produced by this teaching, when carried out, are they actions that would be blamed? Are they actions you would be ashamed of? The word covers more than social embarrassment. It points to two things at once. It points to what a person of good judgment, watching from the outside, would have grounds to criticize, and it points to what the actor himself, looking honestly at what he has done, would have grounds to be ashamed of. The two move together. If something is blameworthy in the eyes of the wise, the actor in his deeper honesty will usually know it to be blameworthy. The outer view and the inner view, when they agree, are telling you something. The third component is the one that the popular reading entirely overlooks. It is vinyugarahita. It is translated by Bodhi as censured by the wise. Thanissaro renders it criticized by the observant. The word vinyu refers to those who are wise, those who know, those who have practiced and seen. Garahita, censured, criticized, faulted. This component matters because it pierces the popular reading at its center. The Kālamas Sutta is not, in fact, an endorsement of pure individualism. The Buddha is not telling the Kālamas to make a private judgment in isolation about what is true. He is telling them to check their own observations against the judgment of those who have practiced longer and seen more. The wise, the community of those who know, play a role in this method. They are part of the criterion. This is not the spirit of trust, only your own reason. This is closer to the spirit of test what you have come to think, and then check it against people whose practice has gone deeper than yours. Who then are the wise? The Buddha does not give the Kālamas an institutional answer. He does not tell them to consult the priests of a particular order, the elders of a particular lineage, the credentialed authorities of a particular school. He leaves the identification of the wise to the Kālamas' own discernment. The wise, in the Buddhist tradition, are those whose own lives show the fruits the method is meant to produce. People whose actions are observably less governed by greed, hate, and delusion. People whose presence makes others calmer, kinder, more honest. The criterion of the wise is itself the criterion of the method, applied to people rather than to teachings. The fourth component, ahitaya dukkaya samvatanti. These actions, when adopted and practiced, lead to harm and to suffering. The two words together name something larger than either alone. Hita is welfare, the things that genuinely benefit a life. Ahita is the absence or undoing of that benefit. Dukkha is the broader Buddhist term for the dissatisfactions, frictions, and outright sufferings of existence. The compound names actions that not only fail to bring welfare but actively produce conditions in which a life becomes harder, less free, more agitated, more painful. And, this is crucial, the standard is not whether the actor intended these consequences. The standard is whether these consequences in fact follow. The criterion is fruit. What grows from the seed? Put it all together. A teaching is to be rejected, the Buddha says, when you can see for yourself that the actions it produces are unskillful, blameworthy, censured by those who have practiced more deeply than you have, and lead to harm and suffering. The positive inversion is the same criterion turned inside out. A teaching is to be adopted when you can see for yourself that the actions it produces are skillful, blameless, praised by the wise, and lead to welfare and to happiness. As the Buddha puts it at the close of this section, when you know for yourselves that these things are skillful, blameless, praised by the wise, and, when adopted and practiced, lead to welfare and to happiness, then enter and remain in them. Notice what kind of method this is. It is not asking you whether the teaching is metaphysically true. It is not asking you whether the doctrine matches reality. It is asking you what happens when the teaching is put into practice. It is asking what the teaching makes a person do and what the doing leads to. Bhikkhu Bodhi, in his essay on this sutta, first published in the Buddhist Publications Society newsletter in the spring of 1988 and revised for wide online distribution a decade later, calls this approach an acid test for gaining confidence in the Dhamma as a viable doctrine of deliverance. Not a doctrine, a test, a way of finding out. To make the test concrete, the Buddha then asks the Kāḿamas a series of questions. When greed arises within a person, does it lead to that person's welfare or to that person's harm? Hate, when it arises, does it lead to welfare or to harm? Delusion, does it lead to welfare or to harm? The Kāḿamas answer each time that these things lead to harm. The Buddha is not asking them to take a metaphysical position. He is asking them to observe what they can already see, to check what they already know from their own experience of being human, and then the inversion. When non-greed, non-hate, non-delusion arise within a person, what then? The Kāḿamas, again from their own observation, say, this leads to welfare. The Buddha has now demonstrated the method on the most basic moral content imaginable. Things that are observably harmful are to be abandoned. Things that are observably leading to welfare are to be adopted. The standard, in other words, is ethical, not empirical in the modern scientific sense, not true in the laboratory, but skillful in the conduct of life. Bhikkhu Bodhi makes this point with care. The Kāḿamas at the start of the discourse were not yet the Buddha's disciples. They were not yet ready for the full teaching, the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, of dependent origination, of awakening. It would not have been appropriate for the Buddha to expound those things to them in that moment, so he gave them something else, something they could use immediately, a method by which they could begin to discern, from their own ethical experience, what teachings to take up and what to leave aside. The Kalama method is not the whole of the Buddhist path. It is the front door. It is the practice of ethical discernment that opens onto deeper practice. It is, and this is the point, a beginning, not an end. And the discourse, in the actual text, does not stop here. It continues, and where it goes next is the part that the popular tradition has almost entirely forgotten. Chapter 3, where it ends. So far, the popular reading and the actual text have at least overlapped. The popular reading says the Buddha set aside external authorities. The actual text confirms this and goes much further. The popular reading says the Buddha endorsed personal investigation. The actual text gives us instead a 4-part ethical criterion in which personal observation is checked against the judgment of the wise. But what happens next in the canonical text has no equivalent in the popular reading at all. It is not partial. It is not incomplete. It is simply absent. Most of the people who quote the Kalama Sutta have never read this part. Many of the people who teach it do not include this part. Some translators, in their summaries, skip directly from the ethical criterion to the closing benediction and never mention it. The discourse, after establishing the ethical method, does something unexpected. It introduces a meditation practice. Specifically, it introduces the 4 brahmaviharas, the 4 boundless states: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. The Buddha tells the Kāḿamas that the disciple of the Noble Ones, having abandoned the 3 roots of harm, greed, hate, and delusion, proceeds to cultivate these 4 states, pervading all directions with each in turn. This is where the sutta goes, from the ethical criterion to the brahmaviharas, without, and this is important to say clearly, any explanatory sentence in between. I want to be honest about something here, because this is one of those places in the canon where, if we are not careful, we will smooth over a difficulty rather than naming it. The text gives us the ethical criterion. Then the text gives us the brahmaviharas. The text does not, in any visible sentence, explain why one leads to the other. The bridge from abandon the 3 poisons to cultivate the 4 boundless states is not in the canonical sutta as a piece of reasoning. The juxtaposition is canonical. The 2 parts of the discourse stand exactly where they stand, but the explanation of why they stand together, that comes from somewhere else. It comes, in our time, from 2 of the most careful commentators we have. Bhikkhu Bodhi, in his essay on the sutta, and Thanissaro Bhikkhu, in his teachings on it, both supply versions of the bridge. Their accounts agree in substance. The Buddha has demonstrated, through the leading questions on greed and hate and delusion, that the 3 poisons can be observed by you, in your own experience, to lead to harm. He has then asked the same question about their opposites and shown that non-greed, non-hate, and non-delusion can be observed to lead to welfare. The brahmaviharas, in this reading, are the systematic cultivation of those opposites. Metta, loving kindness, is non-hate developed all the way through. Karuna, compassion, is non-cruelty as a positive force. Mudita, sympathetic joy, is non-envy and non-resentment turned outward. Upekkha, equanimity, is non-attachment and non-aversion held steady. The 4 boundless states are the ethical criterion put to work as practice. That is the bridge, and it is a beautiful bridge. But it is honest to say that this bridge is supplied by modern teachers, by Bodhi and Thanissaro, and others working in their tradition, and not by the sutta itself. The canonical text moves from one to the other without a connecting sentence. The reconstruction is theirs. The juxtaposition is the Buddha's. This kind of honesty matters. It matters because the sutta has been misread for so long, in so many directions, that it deserves to be read carefully, even where careful reading means acknowledging that we are looking at something we are partly piecing together. The popular tradition skipped this part of the sutta entirely. The careful commentators have given us a way to make sense of why it is there. Both of those facts can be acknowledged at once. Now to the 4 states themselves. The Buddha tells the Kāḿamas that the disciple of the Noble Ones, having abandoned greed, hate, and delusion, dwells pervading one direction with a mind imbued with loving kindness, then the second direction, then the third, then the fourth, above, below, all around, without enmity, without ill will, then in the same way with a mind imbued with compassion, then with sympathetic joy, then with equanimity. These are not abstractions, they are practices. Metta is the cultivation of a wish for the welfare of beings. The traditional practice is concrete and gradual. You begin with yourself, which is sometimes the hardest part. The wish is simple. May I be safe, may I be well, may I be at ease. You sit with the wish repeatedly until it stops being an empty form of words and starts to mean what it says. Then you extend the same wish in the same simple form to someone you love, then to someone you respect but do not know well, then to a stranger, then eventually to someone you find difficult, and then to all beings in all directions without limit. The progression is the practice. The wish, repeated and extended, slowly becomes a settled disposition of the heart. Karuna is the trembling of the heart in the presence of suffering, accompanied by the wish for that suffering to end. The Buddhist tradition is careful to distinguish karuna from pity. Pity looks down. Compassion looks across. Pity assumes a gap between the one who suffers and the one who observes. Compassion recognizes that the gap, if it exists, is largely a trick of the mind. The one who suffers and the one who observes are alike in this. Both are subject to suffering. The practice of karuna extends like the practice of metta, from those close to you outward, without limit. Mudita is the gladness that arises when you encounter the good fortune of another. Gladness rather than envy or resentment. The practice is more counterintuitive than it sounds. Most of us, hearing of another's success, feel a small inward contraction before we feel anything else. Mudita is the deliberate cultivation of the opposite movement, the capacity to take pleasure in another's flourishing as if it were your own. For many practitioners, this is the brahmavihara that is hardest to sustain. Upekkha is the spacious, even ground from which the other three operate without being knocked off balance by preference and aversion. It is often mistranslated in English language Buddhism as indifference or detachment. That is not what it means. Indifference is the absence of caring. Upekkha is caring that has been steadied. It is the capacity to hold the welfare of beings, your own welfare and the welfare of others, without lurching toward those you favor and away from those you find difficult. It is the equanimity that lets compassion remain compassion when faced with overwhelming suffering, that lets sympathetic joy remain sympathetic joy when faced with the success of those you have reason to envy, that lets loving kindness remain loving kindness when extended to those who have harmed you. Without upekkha, the other three states tend to collapse under their own intensity. With upekkha, they can be sustained. It is the ground that holds the rest in place. The popular reading of the Kāḿamas Sutta could end with "follow your own reason." The actual sutta ends with this, with the four boundless states, with the systematic cultivation in your own mind of the qualities that you have observed lead to welfare. Method, then practice, and then, at the very end, something I find quite remarkable. The Buddha, having taught the brahmaviharas, says that the disciple who dwells in these four states obtains, in this very life, four assurances. The Pali term is kattaro asasa. The word asasa literally means in breath, and by extension, easy breathing, relief, consolation. Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as assurances. Thanissaro Bhikkhu uses the same word. The translator, Soma Thera, whom we encountered earlier, renders it solaces. Whichever word we use, assurances, solaces, easy breaths, the meaning is the same. Four reliefs, four pieces of peace that the practitioner obtains in this life, here and now. Listen carefully to what they are. We will use Thanissaro Bhikkhu's translation. I am going to read all four without interruption. If there is a world after death, and if there is the fruit of actions rightly and wrongly done, then it is possible that, with the breakup of the body, after death, I will reappear in a good destination, the heavenly world. This is the first assurance. If there is no world after death, and if there is no fruit of actions rightly and wrongly done, then here in the present life I look after myself with ease, free from hostility, free from ill will, free from trouble. This is the second assurance. If evil befalls the doer of evil, then, having willed no evil for anyone, having done no evil action, from where will suffering touch me? This is the third assurance. But if evil does not befall the doer of evil, then I can assume myself pure in both respects. This is the fourth assurance. Let those four sit for a moment before we say anything about them. Notice what the Buddha has done. He has taken the question that the Kāḿamas could not avoid, the question that anyone in their position would have to confront, the question of whether the metaphysical claims of the various competing teachers were true. And he has set the question aside, not by answering it, not by dismissing it, by showing that the question can be set aside without loss. If there is rebirth and karmic consequence, the practice protects you. If there is no rebirth and no karmic consequence, the practice protects you in a different way. If evildoers are punished, you are safe because you have done no evil. If evildoers are not punished, you are still safe because you have done no evil and have not stained yourself with hatred or cruelty in any case. The metaphysical question, does the universe enforce moral consequence, is left exactly where the Kāḿamas, in their honest doubt, had left it. The Buddha does not require them to settle the question to obtain the benefit of the practice. The practice produces value regardless. Whatever turns out to be true about the cosmos, you have lived a life free from hostility, free from cruelty, free from the inner agitation of having harmed others. You have, as the second assurance says, looked after yourself with ease. This is the moment that the popular reading replaces with follow your own reason. This is what the popular reading erases. A word of honest caveat is in order here. Bhikkhu Bodhi, who is otherwise generous toward Western interpreters of this sutta, draws a careful line at this point. The four assurances, he reminds us, do not license the denial of rebirth or the dismissal of moral cause and effect as Buddhist teachings. The Buddha is not telling the Kāḿamas that rebirth is uncertain. He is telling them that the practice does not depend on their having settled the matter. The two are different claims. The first would change the Buddhist position. The second is the Buddhist position, adapted to the specific moment of teaching, addressed to listeners who had not yet adopted any of it. The assurances bracket the question. They do not erase it. What the Buddha has offered, in the structure of this entire discourse, is a path of entry, a way for someone who does not yet trust the teaching to begin the practice anyway, and to find, in the practice itself, the basis on which trust can eventually be built. This is the front end of something larger. The technical Buddhist term for the result of this longer process is avikapasada, verified confidence, not blind faith. Confidence that has been tested through experience and found to hold. The Kalama method opens the door. What lies beyond the door, the stages of awakening, the deeper confidences and verifications that follow, is the subject we will turn to in another video. For tonight, what matters is the door itself. The door is open, and the discourse, at the moment we have just heard, has shown us how to walk through it. Close why it matters. The popular version of the Kalama Sutta gives you something easy. It gives you permission. Permission to set aside what you have been told. Permission to dismiss what does not fit your reasoning. Permission, in the strongest form of the misreading, to believe whatever your own mind on its own has come to find true. This permission is comforting. It flatters the modern reader, and it is not what the Buddha said. The actual sutta offers you something harder, not permission, a method. The method has 4 parts. We have seen all four. Look at the actions a teaching produces and see, in your own experience, whether those actions are skillful or unskillful, blameless or blameworthy, leading to welfare or leading to harm. Check what you have come to think against the judgment of those who have practiced longer than you. Cultivate in your own mind the qualities you have observed lead to welfare, the four boundless states, and rest in the four assurances that this practice provides, regardless of what turns out to be true about the cosmos. This is not follow your own reason. This is harder than that. Following your own reason can be done in an afternoon. The method the Buddha gave the Kāḿamas is the work of a lifetime. The work of a lifetime in this case has a specific shape. It is not the kind of work that produces a finished result and then stops. It is iterative. You observe what your actions are producing in your own life and in the lives of those around you. You check what you observe against the judgment of people whose practice has gone deeper than yours. You adjust. You watch again. You check again. You adjust again. The method does not deliver a doctrine at the end. It delivers instead a person whose perception of what is skillful and what is unskillful has been slowly refined over years and decades into something approaching wisdom. This is not what the modern reader reaching for an inspirational poster was looking for, but it is what the Kāḿamas, after their honest doubt, were given, and it is what is on offer in the actual text. Remember what the Kāḿamas had asked. They had not asked for the truth. They had asked, whom should we believe? They had been to the marketplace too many times. They had heard too many confident men contradicting each other. They wanted to know whose word they could trust, and the Buddha, in answering them, did something neither side of the contemporary debate has fully understood. He did not give them a teacher to trust. He did not tell them to trust themselves. He gave them a practice, a way of acting, watching, and checking that would eventually generate from the inside out the basis on which trust could be built. Not trust in him, not trust in their own unaided reason. Trust that would emerge from the practice itself as the practice produced its observable fruits. Avikappasada, verified confidence, is the name of what would, in time, grow out of the soil he was preparing. This is the part the modern world has had trouble hearing, because the modern world, with the best of intentions, has wanted Buddhism to be a religion that requires nothing, a religion of pure inquiry, a religion that flatters the questioner and demands nothing of the doer. The Kālamas Sutta, in its popular form, fits that wish almost perfectly. The actual sutta does not. The actual sutta asks for an ethical life, a life of non-hostility, of non-cruelty, of cultivated loving kindness. Long before it asks you to believe anything, it asks for the practice first. Belief, if it comes later. And it comes as something you have earned, not as something you have been required to accept. So if you have ever quoted the Kālamas Sutta, and many of us have, including the people who have spent their lives studying it, there is something worth doing tonight before the next time you reach for it. Read the whole sutta. Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation is freely available through the Buddhist Publication Society and on the Sutta Central website. Thanissaro Bhikkhu's translation is freely available at dhammatalks.org. Both are short. Either can be read in 20 minutes. Read all the way to the 4 assurances. Sit, as the Buddha asked the Kālamas to sit, with what is actually there. And then, if it seems good to you, if it seems blameless to you, if those whose practice has gone deeper than yours speak well of it, and if its fruits, in your life and the lives of those around you, are the fruits of welfare and not of harm. Enter and remain in it. The Kāḿamas wanted to know whom to trust. The Buddha told them, here is how to begin building the basis for trust, not through authority, not through your own reasoning alone in a room, through seeing directly what leads to harm and turning away from it, through seeing directly what leads to welfare and turning toward it, through holding both observations against the judgment of those who have practiced longer, and through living day after day in such a way that the four assurances become not theory but experience. This is the sutta everyone cites and almost no one finishes. It is one of the deepest, gentlest, and most practical teachings in the entire Pali Canon. It does not promise you certainty. It promises you something better than certainty. It promises you a way of living that holds up regardless of how the metaphysical questions turn out. That is what the Kāḿamas were given. And that, in the actual text, not the poster, not the bookmark, not the fabricated quote, but in the words the Buddha is recorded as having spoken at Kesaputta 2.5 millennia ago, is what is still on offer tonight for anyone willing to read all the way to the end.